Good afternoon and welcome to Plymouth Covenant Church. It's great to have you with us today as we celebrate David's life. What an honor it is to be here together. Last night I was invited over to the family's house, to Sandy's house and David's house for dinner. It was just a marvelous time and the conversation was great. And then I got to tour a little bit of the house and I went to the sacred places that David loved. I saw his library. Have you seen his library? All his books, my goodness. Went downstairs into the inner sanctum, down where he spent his time, right? Where you sent him away sometimes. And I got to see all his adventures and all his memorabilia. It was a little bit of his life for me. And I so appreciated that. What he loved to read, though, was the Bible. He read the Bible again and again and again. And I'm sure, and you're welcome to pick up some of these today, aren't they? He's got these little Post-it notes throughout his Bible. All his favorite passages and all the places that he needed to go back to. And I thought the selection of the text today that you picked was really good. It comes from Psalm. If you look at the front of your bulletin, you can read it with me. I guess it's on the inside of the bulletin. Bottom of the page it says, "And it is written, the day the Lord has made, let us rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice." Now I have to confess, I've never read that at a funeral. Because oftentimes when you come together, it's a time of grieving and mourning. It's not a time to be glad. I think Papa D would want us to be glad. To think beyond the loss, but also his gain. To see what he has gained, but also to see what we have gained. So many things in our life are different because Papa D pressed his life into us. How he impacted us, how he gave us life. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in so many things. What I would love to have you do is we're going to be having lunch afterwards to think of all the things that you can rejoice in, that you can give thanks to God for in David's life. Oh, I remember when. I can't forget. Do you know that and to think about all the different things that you can be grateful today for David's life. I'd like to begin by doing that in prayer. Would you please pray with me? Father God, I'm so grateful for David's life. Though I didn't meet him, God, the stories that I've heard and just the chance to be with the family has been so, so great. I thank you, Father, for his life, a life that was larger than life. His fingerprints are on us, God. His influence in us, the way he impacted and cared for us, his generosity, his call to adventure, we will never be the same. For that, we're most grateful. We're reminded in the Bible, it says that you knit him together while he was in his mother's womb. Perfectly and wonderfully he was made. Oh, he wasn't perfect. But God, we loved him. We're so grateful for him. I pray, God, that you would continue to allow us to heal even as we tell stories today, as we sing songs, as we read the scripture. I pray that this memorial might be a time where we can truly lean into your promises and allow the healing to begin in our lives. And for Papa D, this is the day that he fully lives. He's rejoicing in you. In Jesus' name, amen. I'll ask Kira to lead us in song at this time.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand. is past and gone. At the river I stand, guide my feet, hold my hand, take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. Sing, precious Lord, precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the night. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home.
Favorite songs. He really loved hymns, and I don't get to hear him too often today. So when I hear him, especially the ones I remember as a kid, him loving, it's just right to your heart. So I hope you all appreciate hearing that one that maybe you haven't heard in a while. I am Melissa Markham. Dad and I became father-daughter when my mom, Sandy, married him in 1989. That's about 33 years. We were together on this earth and had a beautiful parent-child relationship. At the beginning, though, it wasn't always easy for us. I was 14 when I first met him and a teenager adjusting to a new step-parent, and we struggled. But looking back, I know God put him in my life for a purpose. You see, God takes things that are broken and he can fix them and transform them into something beautiful. Dad taught me a lot of things, and one of the things he wanted to instill in us was the value of people and helping those less fortunate than us. As the Vice President of Human Resources at Gerdes Foods, he believed in giving people second chances and gave them an opportunity to have a fresh start at a new job that paid well. That was really important to him. We could fill this hour with testimony after testimony from people who were employed through Gerdes that Dad gave them a second chance and believed in them and made their life different. And as a teenager, I didn't quite understand his passion for doing this or why he thought it was so important for me to learn. But as an adult now, I see he was planting his seeds. He wanted me to put people first and to help those less fortunate. And as an adult, I constantly remember those messages and what he was teaching me. You're going to see outside on the memorial table, and perhaps some of you already have, Dad's Bible. I think it's pretty impressive because it's really worn. He loved reading his Bible. He would sit at the family table and read from it every day, and he'd have a journal. He'd write down the date, what he read, and any thoughts or implications for him at that time, which is just really beautiful in my mind because you can go back now and kind of see what he was thinking in his innermost thoughts. You also will see, when you open it up, he had a preference for orange highlighter. He highlighted a lot in orange, things that spoke to him. And he also used these tabs, and they were all over. And I knew he liked them because he'd give them to my son and my daughter and me, and I'd use them. But in uncovering some of his stuff through the year, Mom found literally a box of these Post-it sticky notes. I don't know if he thought they were going to stop making them or what, but it's just so true to Dad. If one was good, 10 was better. So they are out there, and we'd love for you to take one with you and use it and just think of Dad and how he was. One of the things, too, I remember going on trips even to Florida with them, he'd bring his Bible with him, and he'd sit outside, and he'd read that while we'd be swimming, and he just felt such joy to be able to share that time with the family, share that time in the Word. And he'd often come to me and share things that were important to him, the messages he heard, and I would do likewise. I actually went downstairs into his office not too long ago and saw he still had a Post-it note I made for him from Thessalonians, a Bible verse, and he had kept it there. And that was just kind of our little back and forth of Bible verses and ways to encourage each other to live a godly life. We were both just awed by God and His grace, His glory, and know that we are nothing without God and His grace, and that He instills in us the ability for goodness and kindness and love to others. And in a way, we both felt like God was giving us a second chance, like Dad had encouraged so much, and it meant a lot. One of his favorite Bible verses that encapsulates this is Psalm 62, verses 5 through 8. Find rest, O my soul, in God alone. My hope comes from Him. He alone is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in Him at all times. O people, pour out your hearts to Him, for God is our refuge. Just put it here. There? Okay. We have two videos. My brother and his family are in California and couldn't be here, so we have a video message from them and one from a family friend, the Royers, who couldn't be here. And then we also have some members of the Meckler family who are going to come up and talk. So.
Thank you for allowing David and I to share a few of our thoughts that we have about our dear friend, David Gerdes. We've come to love David and Sandy as family, and we miss him dearly. So these are some thoughts that I wrote down. Recently, my cousin Roger called to tell me that he'd been watching a travel show on Sanibel Island. Roger asked if we had ever been there, and I said, absolutely. Yes, we have been. In fact, we were able to enjoy an entire week on the island due to the generosity of our dear friend, David Gerdes. David was always performing overwhelming, generous acts of kindness. How lucky were we, David and I, to have such a friend. From the moment we met David, he had a way of making us feel like a part of his family. In a very short amount of time, my husband David and I were going on vacations together with the Gerdeses and sharing holidays. David and I, transplants to Minnesota, were warmly embraced by this warm and lovely man and his warm and lovely wife, Sandy. Our children looked up to him as the grandfather they never had, and Sandy as the grandmother they never had. While David certainly possessed a passion for work and friends, the greatest source of pride and joy in David's life was his family. All of you. The overflowing love that David had for each of his grandchildren was evident to everyone. Whatever they were interested in, he was interested in. The only thing that mattered to David was that he got to share time with his grandchildren. You were his world. David's children were also a tremendous source of pride and admiration, and he relished all of your accomplishments. The first 10 years of our friendship, David and I didn't know which children belonged to David and which belonged to Sandy because they never differentiated. You were a blended family in the best sense of the word. You were his world. Sandy, you know this already, but it must be said. David was utterly devoted to you. How many times did he tell us about how you met and how quickly he fell in love with you? David even planned your wedding down to the smallest detail. Both of you were role models on how to love passionately, live fully, and give generously. You indeed were his world. Family traditions. David absolutely loved family traditions. I suspect that David cherished them because they were yet another excuse to celebrate. These are the few of the traditions that we remember, although there were many more that I'm sure you guys have in your memory. Thanksgiving morning cinnamon rolls, Christmas Eve champagne toasts, holiday brunches at Dayton's, and steakhouse dinners with his grandsons. We never were present at some of these events, but we heard about them often from David and how happy he was to share them with you. David, you are truly missed. How I wish we could share one last meal together as we have so many times in the past. The evening would start with some fine wine, an exquisitely prepared meal, and end with lively conversation. Topics might include religion, family, current events, or the latest best-selling book. Rest in peace, dear friend. You are missed. This is from all the Royers, David, Cheryl, Emily, Juliana, Olivia, and Andrew, our newest family member. Thinking of you all.
Hello, everyone. I wish my family and I could be joining you in person today. We miss you all very much. We look forward to being together again soon. When I think of David, one of the first things I will always remember and cherish is the La Familia, La Familia, La Familia mantra he would frequently repeat at every family gathering. He stated this whenever he could to remind us the importance of family and that we all need to make an effort to ensure our relationships flourish. Reflecting further upon David, I don't know anyone who is as big as a Christmas fanatic than me. Well, maybe except for David. He's the one who inspired me to take my love for Christmas to the next level. Christmas at my mom and David's was always a magical experience. Our kids felt like they had been transported to Mr. and Mrs. Claus's house at the North Pole when we would visit. It truly isn't any wonder that a person who prioritizes the importance of family wouldn't take Christmas and its traditions and its festivities any less serious. So I say again, as David always did, La Familia, La Familia, La Familia. As a kid growing up in a vegetarian household, no offense to mom's cooking, I had no idea about such culinary delights before I met David. It was David who inspired me to appreciate gourmet food and then started me down the expensive addiction of eating at some of the finest restaurants in the world. Luckily, I married a woman who can cook better than a Michelin-star chef, so thank you, Sydney. Although I realize now there was something more for David than just eating and making really good food. The food was actually an enticing means to bring our families together as frequently as he could. So I'll say again, as David did, La Familia, La Familia, La Familia. Knowing a spiritual practice is a cornerstone to a healthy and prosperous family. David's deep-rooted commitment to studying the scriptures was another example where he worked to strengthen our family bonds and inspire us to be more devoted in our faith. So I'll say again, La Familia, La Familia, La Familia. I could go on, highlighting all of David's remarkable attributes that bonded our families together. But I know there are other speeches today, and I want to close by also reflecting upon and thanking David for his generosity, being a loving father figure, an absolutely amazing Papa D to Colette and August, who absolutely adored him, our frequent thought-provoking and inspiring conversations we would often have, our bonding over jazz music, so many other areas. But lastly, most importantly, I want to thank David for being such a wonderful husband to my mom. We love you, David, and you will always be in our hearts. Love Familia, La Familia, La Familia. The Burkhart family.
Thank you all for coming today. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust, sweat, and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. The man in the arena, Teddy Roosevelt, 26th President of the United States. For many years, this quote has hung on my wall, gifted to me by David Gerdes, or Papa D, as he was affectionately known by his family. As I tried to think of the words to summarize his larger-than-life persona and the immeasurable impact he had on my life, I continued to come back to Roosevelt's speech. From the time each of his grandchildren was born, he never missed a moment, creating memories at childhood sleepovers, attending our sporting events and school plays. He shared his love of sports with my brother Wyatt and I, often sending texts in the middle of the night asking if we had stayed up to watch the game that went into extra innings. He certainly had not missed a pitch. Who could forget the experience of sitting courtside at Timberwolves games or first row at Fenway Park, while Papa D taught us all the unwritten rules of the beautiful game. His passion for reading he shared with every member of his family, always happy to recommend a new book, while his love for the holidays, particularly Thanksgiving and Christmas, was truly unmatched, as were his patented red holiday sweaters. In true Papa D fashion, he would always bring a second copy of the Thanksgiving newspaper so that everyone had a copy to color in the morning. This tradition continued for many years, even after we stopped coloring in the newspaper. I could sit and tell stories about David and the impact he had on me for hours, a trait I most certainly inherited from him. While there was so much more I wanted to share with him, I will forever be grateful for the years we had with him, the lessons he taught us, and the values he helped to instill, the most important of these being that family is the most important, or as he was known for saying, a la familia. No one is perfect, and David would have been the first one to admit his mistakes to you if you asked. Okay, maybe not right away. He came short time and time again, personally and professionally. However, he never stopped being himself, always with a smile on his face and a story to tell. To me, he truly was the man in the arena. Thank you all for coming out to show your support for David and his life.
Nicely said, Zachary. I'm Mark Meckler. I'm Zach's dad, Sarah's husband. I met David Gerdes in 1988 as I began to date Sarah. I believe it may have been at a townhouse that he and Sandy rented in Plymouth. As it turns out, I think we were dropping Amanda off for the evening, and I was shown to the basement to wait while they got her ready for the night. I remember a roaring fire in the basement fireplace and was introduced to the glove. David had a leather glove. I believe it was split calfskin in red. He used it to handle logs and hot fire tongs with ease. I later came to realize this actually exemplified David Gerdes. He always had a toy, usually the latest and the best to deal with any situation. And mind you, this was before Amazon. Whether he was shopping the catalogs on the airplanes or the many that he had arriving at the house, this man could shop. I still have a full German toolbox from him, a multi-dial watch that tells me the phases of the moon, and of course, and most importantly, countless memories that he helped us create with our children. He was the consummate grandfather as well as father-in-law, and he could always be counted on to surprise his family with huge meals and great holiday presents. Today, I'd like to honor his memory with a few of my favorite Papa D stories. When Sarah and I moved to Mankato, Sandy and David would often come and visit and spend time to see Amanda and hang out with us. As a matter of fact, they would come for holidays like Thanksgiving, and our tradition was to go out to dinner the night before. In 1993, the four of us headed out to a supper club. I think Amanda might have been up here visiting Tim, some 20 miles away in Kasota, Minnesota. It started to snow as we left the house, lightly, but by the time we arrived, it was one of those Minnesota whiteouts. We were among a handful of brave guests in the restaurant, and that night, with David's help and an incredibly friendly waitress, we discussed potential baby names. We did not know whether we were having a boy or a girl yet, but one of the most popular names and the ultimate winner was Zachary. I had to practically hold David down to earth as we left the restaurant. He was so ecstatic to have been part of that process. And I think that's when it actually struck me that he had become my dad too. The tradition continued when we moved to Milwaukee. Wyatt arrived, and David and Sandy would come to visit often and, of course, help us with two toddlers. One of the early Halloweens, we all went to a pumpkin patch where they had camel rides for the kids, going around bales of hay in the middle. David mounted a camel, put Wyatt in front of him, who was about 18 months old, and they went around the circle. David was not a fan of the hump, by the way. When the ride was over, he hopped off and walked directly away, and the gentleman running the ride turned around and shouted at him, "Hey, mister, don't you want your baby back?" When we returned to Minneapolis as a family, the traditions continued. David and Sandy would start to come over every Thanksgiving early in the morning and make brunch with us. They were always careful to bring enough copies of the turkey from the Star and Tribune for everybody to color, and together he and Sarah would start an enormous pot of mashed potatoes replete with several sticks of butter. The turkey would already be in the oven by the time we sat down to brunch, and he would commence with his familiar toast over Bloody Marys, yep, you got it, a la familia. We would finish brunch and watch a bit of the Macy's parade, and then they would leave for the afternoon and go home to take a nap before the real festivities began at dinner time. Our first year back, I found a life-size Santa Claus that had a motion center in the base. When you walked past him, he would play music and dance on his pedestal. I secretly set him up in the foyer after they had left and waited for David to walk through the door. The look on his face was pure delight. It was like a little boy on Christmas morning. I wish I had captured it in a photo. It also started a long run of us putting up large inflatable toys at Thanksgiving that ultimately graced the Gerdes deck and yard for Christmas. Speaking of Christmas, David made sure that under his tree, the gifts for our children were all wrapped in Hanukkah paper and very obvious when they visited. He was always concerned that all of his grandchildren would be treated equally and that all of his promises would be honored. I could not possibly share with you all of the great memories, or for that matter, the things that David taught me as a dad or as a man. I remember to this day the feeling of pride I had when we took a tour of our first together home in Mankato, and he patted me on the shoulder and told me how well we had done. Whether it was teaching me about Dom Perignon or the correct way to open it, you twist the bottle, by the way, not the cap, or where to find the best sandwich on Sanibel Island, it's Schnappers, he continued to teach me right up until the end. So I'd like to conclude today by retelling a story one of my regular columnists published last week. I like this story. I think it fits David's life rather well. When I was a young boy, I remember my father coming home looking very ashen from a visit with a dear friend dying in the hospital. The man's name was Del Zink, and he was one of my father's closest friends. Mr. Z, as we affectionately called him, was a very religious man, a man who was regarded by his friends as intelligent and philosophical. Dad told me about the visit. He said that Mr. Z told him he was prepared to meet his maker, and at last he would know the great secret. My father did not elaborate, obviously under emotional stress, about losing his friend. But I never forgot the phrase, "At last he will know the great secret." I often thought about the great secret, what it really meant, what the great secret might really be. But after wrestling with the possible answer for years, it appeared unanswerable to me, so I set it aside. Recently, a friend of mine became ill, and the phrase, "the great secret," came back to mind. It haunted me. It kept me awake at night. Then one day near the end of my friend's struggle for life, he seemed to arrive at a great tranquility, a peaceful acceptance of his fate. A serene, almost holy calm surrounded him. I suddenly realized he finally knew the great secret. And by being near him, nursing him, watching him deal with his illness in such a brave and dignified manner, I also knew the answer too. The great secret is how you lived your life, how you raised your family, how you treated other people, what you gave back to society. In other words, you don't have to wait until death to learn the great secret. If you did well by your fellow man, you don't have to worry about the hereafter at all. It's already taken care of. But it's not the end, it's just the beginning. I believe all that Bible study everyone's talking about that David was doing the last few years, that was his effort to understand the great secret. And yet, here he was on earth, already living it. May his memory be a blessing.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm David's oldest daughter. Thank you all for coming today to remember and honor my father, David Eilert Gerdes. There are only a few people here today who knew him longer than I did, so I've chosen to primarily share memories from early in my life to allow you a window into that time in his life. My sister and I were Quiddy and Guzzo to our father. He loved to call us by those names long after we were little girls. Even when I had grown children of my own, he would sometimes start a phone conversation with, "Hey, Quid, how are you?" When Stephanie, who isn't able to be here today, and I sat down a few weeks ago in New Jersey to start writing this speech, we quickly realized that many of our earliest and best memories revolved around music and food. From Betsy in the Morning, which my dad sang to me as a baby, to the U of M Rouser, which was taught to both of us as little girls, not so we could go to the football games, but to be able to sing along with the marching band as we followed them prior to the game, to I Calypso and Rocky Mountain High by John Denver, which we sang as we danced through our living room. No genre was off limits, yet each evoked emotion. Christmas music was sacred, not because it was religious, but because all the songs that made the playlist were favorites, year after year, and they brought back memories of times past. There were years that his answering machine message was a rotating list of hits by Jimmy Buffett, Billy Joel, and Gloria Estefan, reflecting what was happening in his life at that moment. Cabin music was its own genre, once again with hours of thought going into what we listened to. Frank Sinatra was a regular favorite, and You Make Me Feel So Young was played for many birthdays. After he met Danny Morgan, we all had CDs and t-shirts and danced to tunes that made us feel the sand between our toes and the sun on our faces. Stephanie and I still sing Sunshine Girl to our daughters, with memories of our dad singing it to us. Music even seeps into other memories, like going to Twins games. Our dad developed a special friendship with Wally the Beer Man and Igor, who sold peanuts. Seeing them was always a highlight, only matched by his passion for singing the national anthem and take me out to the ball game during the 7th inning stretch. Steph and I still have vivid memories of following our dad through the crowd after the Twins won the World Series in 1987, high-fiving everyone he could reach. When I was young, grocery stores were closed on Sundays, as well as every minor holiday. I would accompany my dad as he checked that refrigerators and freezers were working and would sit on the conveyor belt at the register and talk to him on the PA system, requesting price checks as I played cashier. I would follow his progress through the store as he answered my queries. Vacations always included a field trip to the local grocery and the purchase of regional specialties, a tradition that continues to this day as I've dragged my family to markets all over the world. My 13th birthday present was a KitchenAid mixer that we used to make bread together, which, if you knew my dad, was best eaten warm, slathered in butter. Trips to the state fair were meticulously planned to best enjoy a whole day of greasy food and as much of the ice-cold, all-you-can-drink milk as we could stomach. Other must-dos were a stop at the WCCO radio booth and visits to the small bandstands with a variety of local music offerings. As little girls, we learned how to make perfect spritz cookies and the smoothest mashed potatoes, swimming in butter. No one ever made a family steak that could rival my father's, and believe me, I've tried. Nothing brought together his love of food and music more than holidays. Thanksgiving was epic my whole life, and he earned the moniker Turkey Technician, or TT, shortly after Mark and I got married. Until Mark started smoking a turkey, Papa's was always the star. During the years that one would go in the oven and one in the smoker, there was a lot of good-natured ribbing about whose would be better, and I think we all agreed they were both best in their class. This year on my dad's birthday, Mark and Amanda and I spent the day in Sanibel, reliving memories of favorite places we would go with Papa. We had lunch at Schnappers, eating hot dogs and french fries, which he enjoyed as much as a silver butter knife steak at Murray's. As the sun set and we made our way back over the causeway, our hearts were a little lighter, and I sang, "Wish You Were Here," along with Danny Morgan, thankful for the great memories I'll always carry of my father.
Hi, I'm McLaren, and this is my little brother Caleb, and we are two of Papa's grandchildren. My Papa was an incredibly generous person. He gave without expecting anything in return and received so much joy from giving to others. Papa would always make sure to put the grandchildren first and to make sure that we were always taken care of. Growing up, we lived in different states, and one of my favorite memories is that my Papa and Grandma would always drive out every year to see us. I always looked forward to them visiting. When my mom, brother, and I moved back to Minnesota, Grandma and Papa welcomed us into their home with very open arms. I can't thank Papa enough for stepping up and being the father figure in my life, and for being there when I needed him the most. Papa always made sure to take care of me no matter what it was. He enjoyed spending any time he could with the grandchildren. Papa would oftentimes take me to soccer practice and just watch, and of course afterwards we'd go to Dairy Queen to get banana shakes. Papa taught me so much throughout life, but one thing he instilled in me is to make sure you tell your loved ones how much they mean to you. He also taught me my love for traditions, Frank Sinatra, and most importantly, a love for good banana ice cream. One of Papa's favorite Bible verses was Luke chapter 6, verses 35 through 36. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, because he is kind for the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Jesus teaches us about loving our enemies in these verses, and Papa loved to share these verses with us. Papa recognized it's easy to give to our family and loved ones, but to be able to give to those who are enemies doesn't always come easy, but we should always try. He highlighted this verse to remind him to do so. Papa taught me so much in life. We've had so many amazing memories that I will always cherish. I miss you so much. Until we meet again.
cause pain. I have wept for love of them. They turn away. I will break their hearts of stone. Give them hearts for love alone. I will speak my words to them. Whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. It is I, Lord. I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart. Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart.
Thank you so much. It's great to hear some of the old songs again. That was a song of surrender. I don't know if you were listening. A song of relationship with God and then surrendering to who he is. Something that David had to learn. Here I am. Whatever you're asking me to do, I'll do it. It's interesting. I was thinking about a verse to read, and it's actually one chapter away from the one that Melissa read. It's Psalm 63. It's a psalm of David, King David, and he was in the desert hiding for his life. I just want to read a couple verses. I think you'll find the application. There's a truth here for all of us that I just want to point out just in a moment. You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there is no water. I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands. I will be fully satisfied as with the richest of foods. With singing lips my mouth will praise you. On my bed I will remember you. I think of you through the watches of the night, because you, and you alone, are my help. I sing in the shadow of your wing. It's a great honor for me just to lead this service, to be asked to be able to be a part of it. And my regret is this: I didn't know David personally, but boy, hearing the stories, I think I know him. I just have loved the stories from the family, from everybody as they've shared, and I'm looking forward to hearing more after during lunch. But I've discovered I would have really liked David. I think we would have got along really well. We both love food an awful lot. I don't know how many of you talked about food. I think everybody has. David and food were inseparable. I love food, and I heard he likes Waffle House. Now, very few people like Waffle House, and I always have you like Waffle House? Oh, awesome. We'll go. The closest one is Colorado, and I think David would have gone on a field trip with me. I just love my wife doesn't like it. I just love it. You haven't had a T-bone steak till you've had one at Waffle House. They come out kind of gray. Have you noticed that? And David and I would have probably just really enjoyed that. And what else? He liked to ride the bus. I don't know if anybody likes riding the Greyhound bus besides me. I look forward to going to conferences, and I take either the bus or train whenever I can. And I just love riding the Greyhound bus. You meet the strangest people on the Greyhound bus. And that's what they say after they've sat with me, probably, but it's just a great trip. And I don't know if you saw the pictures, but David has a pair of high-top red Converse, right? I saw that he was actually the ball boy was George Mike in there when he was there? That's pretty amazing to think that he was actually a ball boy for George Mike and the Lakers when I used to like them before they became the bad LA Lakers, but just awesome. But he had some red high-top Chuck Taylors, and I've been known to wear them when I do weddings. People like the red tennis shoes. And he loved Jesus. I think we could have talked a lot. I would have loved the conversations, the things we would have talked about, and it would have been great to learn from him. It just seems like he had a handle on the world and people that a lot of people miss these days. I would have liked him. What I've heard people say again and again is that he was larger than life. Do you see that he was larger than life sometimes? He was just bigger than anything around him. I think it was you, Peter, that said he would say, go big. If we're going to have a Christmas, let's go big. I mean, your inflatable toys got bigger and bigger and bigger at Thanksgiving, I bet. And he loved to go big. He was bigger than life. There's only certain people like that. And David was one of those. But when you're larger than life, you leave a huge hole. When that person steps away, it leaves a huge vacuum. That's called grief. Well, it's been over a year, and it's still intense and painful. To tell the stories that made such a difference, to experience the legacy, to realize that those days are gone are so hard. So I want to just bring out a truth that I think is so helpful, because when you have somebody who's larger than life, it's good to know there's something better than life. And I don't know if you caught that when we read that, but it said, in verse 3, it said, because your love, your unfailing love, God, is better than life. But boy, I put those two together. Someone who's larger than life and the great loss, but still the great gain that there's something even better than life. What does that mean? Like, David lived life fully, didn't he? He just enjoyed life. He engaged it. He embraced it. He enjoyed it. He did everything he could with life. But I think he knew the secret, and it was kind of in his butter. Like, he loved to add butter to everything. Butter to his bread, butter to his potatoes, butter to his butter. Because sometimes there's things that you enjoy can just be a little bit better if you add a special ingredient. Well, what would you say? He used to have marinated steak smack for 3 days or so, right? A long time. He found that you could take an old piece of meat and you can marinate it long enough, it becomes pretty good. You add something to something that's good, and it becomes better. I like gravy. I put gravy on everything. I can eat anything with gravy. It's amazing to me when I think about how gravy is just the sauce that you add to something that's already good. So I think you get the principle. Life, which is so good, can be even better if you add something else to it. In Psalm 63, it's kind of interesting. David, we think this was before he was king, but he's being pursued. His life is in danger, and he's hiding in the desert of Judah, and it's a dry and dusty place, and there's no water, there's no food, there's no safety. He's running for his life, and in the middle of that, he writes this psalm, and he says, more than water, I thirst after you, God. More than food, I'm filled by you, God. I've seen you, I know you. You are better than life. Quite a statement. He's so thirsty, but he says, I thirst after you because your loving kindness is better than life. I think David understood that. The reason he would pick up his scriptures is, yes, the big secret to understand the questions of life, but also, I think, just to discover what he could add to life to make it better. And that's the love of God. There's lots of different words throughout the Old and New Testament for love, and I could tell you all those different words, but my favorite is the one that's used here. It's the word hesed. It's a Hebrew word that's hard to translate. It's covenantal love. It's unfailing love. It's, to me, my favorite word for God's love. It's the love that will never let me down. Boy, to find that, and to add that to life, it makes it better. To know that David's gone, yes, larger than life, and that the hole is so big in me. But there's something better that comes and can even fill that hole in emptiness. When we experience the greatest things of life, I still remember watching a movie one time about Marilyn Monroe, and my daughter was sitting next to me. She was 16 years old and curious about life, and we watched how she succeeded in so many things, and Marilyn Monroe was so beautiful, and all these things about her life, and then the tragic end where she took her life. And my daughter just turned to me, and she said, why would somebody do that? Somebody who has it all, why would they end their life? And I don't know if this is wisdom, but I turned to my daughter and said, when you have everything and it's not enough, where do you turn? See, when we have everything, but we don't add that love of God, it's never enough. I often go at night and I look for something to eat before I go to bed. Maybe I'm the only person, but you ever open up your fridge and look inside and it's full, but there's nothing there you want? I think that's what causes the northern lights. Everybody in Minnesota at the same time is opening their fridge just to look inside. And I think that's a part of all of us. If we take everything in our life, everything in the fridge, and we look inside, it's just never enough. It's just not right. There's got to be something else. And that's what David found in the desert. It's that unfailing love of God. I can go through anything. I can do without anything if I have that unfailing love of God. Now, David understood that. And what's interesting, David even looked forward to a time when someone would sit on his throne, somebody a part of his family that would live forever. And of course, for us in the church, that's Jesus. And I think he was looking forward to that. And he knew that God's unfailing love would be expressed in the coming of this Messiah. And it was so amazing because God sent his son, it said, to make our life more abundant. God sent Jesus not to take away from life. So many people think the church is this killjoy place where you come and we take away from life. No, we add to life through Jesus Christ. Abundance, he said. I came to give life and give it abundantly. I love the verse where it says God demonstrates his love. He just doesn't say he loves us with an unfailing love. He demonstrates it by even letting his son come and stand in our place to take our judgment. Overwhelming to think that God would sacrifice his own son for me. Hard to believe. And yet it says in the Bible that most people don't receive him. He comes to us and we push him away because we want to be independent. We want to find life on our own. We think we're larger than life sometimes, and it's just never enough. I've discovered, like David, that sometimes I feel like I'm in a desert, though I'm surrounded with people that love me, and I have everything that I need, and I have a great, great job, and yet same days at the end of the day, it's just not enough. And then I remember what I thirst after more than anything. It's the love of God. And when I experience that love, I think that David found in this book, it changes everything. Now, not just stories, but a real Savior who walks with us and talks with us and tells us we're his own. It means everything. Larger than life, yes, David was, but better than life, that's God's unfailing love for you. I want to just close with a story. It's a story I often tell at funerals. It's just a helpful story for me, and if you don't like it, I'm sorry, but it's one of my favorites. It's about a man who was quite wealthy, and he had a son, an only son. His wife had died in childbirth, and he was living with his son, and with his wealth, he would travel the world and collect art. He was quite an art collector, and his son would watch him as his dad would go through the world and pick up various pieces of art that were worth thousands of dollars, and his son became quite an art expert as well. And they amassed a fortune of valuable paintings, and their house was filled with them over the fireplace and down the hall, and worth hundreds of thousands of dollars at the time. His son felt a call to go into the military. It was World War II, and he went over to serve his country, and while he was there, he was killed in battle. The father's heart was just broken. His son meant everything to him. One day when he was mourning in deep depression, he heard a knock on the door. He went over to the door, and there was a young man in a soldier uniform standing, And he just knocked on the door and said, "Could I come in?" And he said, "Well, why?" He said, "Well, I knew your son. In fact, I was there with him when he died." And so he welcomed him in, and the young man told story after story about his son had saved his life and done heroics and how he'd learned to love his son, and they were brothers together. And he said, "And I was a bit of an artist. I loved to paint things. And your son, he was the expert. And one day he said, 'Paint me.' So I painted a picture of your son, and I have it here. And I just wanted to give it to you." And he took it out. It wasn't very good, but the resemblance of his son was remarkable. And he looked at it and he said, this was my son. You captured who he was." He took down an expensive painting over the mantle, and he placed in that stead his son. When the young man left, he sat there in his chair and he looked up, and life would be okay now. His son had returned. Well, they had lived that way for some time, and then that spring he got sick, and the elderly man died. And the world was excited because he had no heirs, and they knew that everything in his house would go up for auction. All this art, the hundreds of thousands of dollars would go on the auction block. And so people came from all over the world, and they gathered for this auction, and they had all of the pieces of art on easels throughout the building, and people gathered. And when they sat down, he said, the auctioneer said this, "As we begin the auction, the first painting that we need to sell is this painting of the sun." And they all laughed. "Really? We didn't come here for that. No, not that. No, we have to sell this painting first." And so he'd said $100, and they laughed. "It's not worth $100. $50, they laughed again, and finally $10 from the back. It was a man that worked at the house. He would come over and help the man, and he worked for the son. And he said, "I knew the son. I would like that painting. $10. Going once, going twice. Sold to the man in the back. With that, he took his gavel out, and he pounded on the auction block, and he said, "That ends our auction." And everybody said, "What? No, we have all these paintings. We came here to buy all these paintings." And he said, No. It says in the will that whoever takes the son gets it all." I think that's the message to me of this. Whoever takes the son, his unfailing love, gets it all. This life that is such a blessing is even better when we add the son. So I want to ask you today, larger than life, better than life? I'd choose both. How about you? Let's pray together. Father, I do thank you for David's example to us, and he understood this truth, that life could be embraced, God. It was something to be enjoyed. But he recognized what it says in the scriptures, just taste and see that the Lord is good, that his unfailing love, God, it's better even than life. And he chose to take the son. He chose to recognize the love that was expressed through the giving of the son, and he's taken the son, and that brought even abundant life. I thank you so much for each of us here today, and God, our relationship with David is so sweet, and we're part of his legacy. I pray that you would show us how to tell his story to other people, how to walk in his footsteps, especially the grandchildren. And I pray, God, as we push forward, that we might learn what truly life is all about, and to live it to its fullest as a family. Thank you. In your name we pray. Amen.
I want to invite you to join us as we sing Amazing Grace together. I believe it's a song that everybody's familiar with. If you want, you can even stand up and we can all sing this together. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now God who called, but God who called me below will be forever mine. Amen.
We thank you so much for coming. We're going to be having lunch right over here. There's restrooms on this side and also in the back. We'd love to have you just stay. Make sure you pick up your C notes, okay? So wherever you stick them around your house, you'll think of Papa D. Thank you so much for coming. God bless you.